Here you can see some rain showers and some of the gorgeous mountains we saw on our way back to La Paz from Copacabana. This week we're moving from La Paz down to Tiwanaku, which you can see there at the bottom of the map. From La Paz, we visited Tiwanaku, starting out at the Basilica of San Francisco for our tour. Tiwanaku was built by the same culture that we saw in Casablanca, and you can see the two alternate spellings from this sign and the previous sign. We're going to follow this overview of Tiwanaku by following up the angled path to the pyramid represented in the site number 4, and then out along the path 5 and so on. So here is this angled path I referred to with the pyramid number 4 there. Anything that you see at Tiwanaku is reconstructed. There was nothing original left built when they began excavating the site. This is the reconstructed base of that large temple at site number 4. The planning at Tiwanaku seems to be structured around a idea of the heavens, the earth, and the subterranean. And so this original first temple is the heavens, or the highest structure. This is a site that's a bit off to the side, represented in number 5 on that original plot we looked at. And it really looks to be a planning or staging ground. So here you can see a model of the Puerto del Sol carved into a rock. This is a subterranean temple that has been one of the more extensively reconstructed on the site. The 3 stones are said to represent a family. The father of the stone has been moved and is currently housed in the museum where we can't take pictures. And here you can see the faces of the cultures of Tiwanaku put in as outsets in that wall. This is the third large temple at the site, said to represent the earth. So it's not quite as high as the first temple we looked at in its original when it was in its original state. One feature I want to point out here is this gutter here. This is going to come back to us in a little bit when we look at a nearby site. Now we're on top of this temple, and we can see the Puerto del Sol, or the door of the sun, which was actually moved onto the top of the platform of this temple, whereas it was originally located a bit a ways from it. These are some of the statues on top of the temple. This one is 2 different colors because of the way it was found. Half of it was still buried underground and half of it was exposed to the elements. I'm going to be quiet for this next bit. This is a Tiwanaku megaphone. So we're going to try it out. I'm going to use my same volume of voice and talk through it. Same volume of voice. Can you hear me better? How did it work? Photography wasn't allowed in the museums at Tiwanaku, but we did take this picture at one of the entryways. It shows the extreme altitude of most of the country of Bolivia. We then had a lunch, which included our first and only taste of llama. It tasted just like cow. After lunch, we did Pumapunka, which is a site right next to Tiwanaku, and it seems to have been a planning or staging ground for Tiwanaku as well as other Tiwanaku sites in the area. This place is incredibly fascinating. Maybe you can tell from the pictures, but the structures there actually look like cement. And the current theory is that it was a very early version of cement, and that the intention here was to create prefab parts that could be built into different temples and structures being built by the Tiwanaku cultures. This is absolutely intriguing to me. Until the Romans, I don't think I've heard of another culture that was possibly using cement or a cement-like process. So this was absolutely fascinating to me, even though on the first site it doesn't look as visually appealing as many of the other ancient sites we've been to. Here is the road back to La Paz. And the day after we went to Tiwanaku, we spent the day exploring the cable car system that is the primary form of mass transportation in La Paz. So these are just like ski lifts, but they are used for everyday commuting around La Paz. Completely fascinating. I had no idea this system existed until we were making our first trip from the airport into town and we saw them. Blown away that this whole system existed and I had no idea. So we spent the entire day exploring it. The previous picture was a stone structure referred to as the Devil's Tooth. You then saw our snack there of coffee and a local treat. The rest of these are just views showing some of the scenery around La Paz, including the incredible changes in altitude among different parts of the city. Coming up, we did catch a parade. This was a Saturday that we were here, and this is in the town of Alto, next to La Paz. I'll be quiet so you can enjoy the sounds. That was one of 3 different parades we saw, probably taking advantage of one of the only long, straight, flat roads in the conjoining area of La Paz and El Alto. From the top of the cable cars, we also saw the primary cemetery in La Paz. The ground was pretty extensive. What was most interesting, though, was the fact that they were basically like condominiums. So you had these buildings, 5 or 6 grave sites high, where the people were laid to rest. This playground in the middle of a traffic circle was one of many we saw in La Paz, so we were happy to get a picture from above. We also did see one alternative cemetery where you didn't have to have your grave in a condominium. After La Paz, we headed down to Aurora, where we did a side trip to Cala Cala for some rock art. The rock art here at Cala Cala was made in the first millennium BC, and it is mostly of llamas, alpacas, and maybe some vicuñas. I say maybe vicuñas because vicuñas are not domesticated, and you do see some figures here where the llamas or the animals seem to be being led by a human figure, like you can see in the upper right. It's a pretty small site, but really interesting, and there is some evidence that there were llama sacrifices that occurred at this site, probably from early initiations of the Tiwanaku culture. All over Bolivia, including to and from Cala Cala from Aurora, we saw lots of stone structures that looked like they could be corrals for animals or housing, such as this one here. Our guides always indicated that they thought they were very old. This is a site of pilgrimage we passed on the way back to Aurora. People make the trek out from Aurora and do the 12 stations of the cross. If you want to look at our expenses and eating schedule, go ahead and pause. Before I let you go, I will point out that we had a 6-week day this week just because we had so much packed in, and the next stage of our journey was more easily added on to the following week rather than included in this week.